The exercise files for today's course are located in the video description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Trish Connor-Cato, and this is Tableau Introduction. Tableau is a visual analytics platform that makes it easier for people to explore and manage data and faster to discover and share insights that can change businesses. It helps people and organizations be more data-driven. Tableau supports data prep, analysis, governance, collaboration, and more. This Tableau basic training course is designed as an introduction to Tableau for beginners. On completing the course, students will have a firm grasp of the basic techniques required to create visualizations and combine them in interactive dashboards. Specifically, students will meet the following learning outcomes, among others: moving from foundational to advanced visualizations, using row-level and aggregate calculations. Thank you for viewing this Tableau introductory course. The third module in this introductory Tableau course is where we'll move from foundational to advanced visualizations. The first lesson, you'll learn how to compare values across different dimensions. The second lesson, we'll get into visualizing dates and times, and then we move on to relating parts of the data to the whole. We'll continue with visualizing distributions and end with visualizing multiple axes to compare different measures. There are a few definitions in here for you. So, qualitative data is descriptive, and quantitative data is numbers-based, countable, or measurable. When we're comparing values across different dimensions, those terms will be important for you to know, at least in the background. Multiple axes are useful for analyzing measures with different scales. So, for example, if your sales numbers are much higher than your profit numbers, and you put them both in the same visualization, your profit marks may not show up as well. So that's an example of when you would want to use multiple axes. So you'll have a scale for each data field that needs one. And then two other terms, continuous and discrete. In terms of an axis, continuous is formed as an unbroken whole without interruption. Generally, continuous fields add an axis to the view. And discrete fields, in terms of an axis, they're individually separate and distinct. Generally speaking, discrete fields add headers to the view. And you'll see all of this in action as we get started. We'll be using our Sample Superstore Live workbook for this module. Okay, so back in Sample Superstore, and I'm still on the order counts by state worksheet. I'm just going to go over a couple of those definitions that I gave you in the slideshow. So on this one, if you do the drop down next to state and province in the rows shelf, you'll see that this is a dimension. But we can change a dimension into a measure anytime we want to. So we're going to hover over measure, and we're going to just select count. So now we're getting a count of states. And it looks weird on this chart. It makes no sense on this kind of chart. So we're going to go back to the drop down for state province, and we are going to click on dimension to turn it back into a dimension like it originally was. Now let's look at the orders measure that's in the column shelf. If we do the drop down on that, you'll see that it is continuous, meaning that you have an unbroken line in the axis. It's just continuous on the bottom of the chart. Let's see what happens if we change that to discrete. So now we have each count of orders is individually separated and distinct. So we're going to go back to the drop down for orders, and we're going to make it continuous again. So you see the difference between continuous and discrete. Now, this state province is a dimension, and the count of orders is a measure. In other words, using some of our definitions, the state province field is qualitative, it is descriptive, and the count of orders field is quantitative, which is numbers based and countable, plus it's measurable. Now we're going to create a new worksheet in this workbook, and we'll be able to learn how to compare values across different dimensions. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new sheet. And we are going to create a crosstab type of visualization. And what that means is that you're using a dimension on both the x-axis and the y-axis. It automatically generates a crosstab. So what we're going to do is we are going to drag our market segment field to the columns shelf. And we're going to drag our state dimension. Where is my state? Oh, it's under location. There it is. State province. And I'm going to drag that to rows. And oh my goodness, I repeated a bunch of stuff here. So once again, my mouse is a little sticky and I apologize for that. I'm going to just remove these extra fields. And so this is the beginnings of a crosstab where I have a dimension on the top axis and a dimension on the left axis. So X and Y here. And now we're going to add another field. We're going to use a measure and we're going to drag sales. We're not going to drag it up to one of the either the columns or rows shelf. We're going to drag sales right here into this section of the crosstab. We'll get the same effect if we drag it to text on the marks card. So whichever way you want to do it. And now we're able to compare the value of sales across different dimensions, market segment and state. And so one of the things we can do with this, of course, is a little formatting. I'd like the sum of sales numbers to be in currency format. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the drop down on sum of sales in the marks card and choose format. And on the format pane for numbers, I'm going to do the drop down and select currency standard. Now we're ready to start talking about visualizing dates and times. So let's start first on the data source tab. And so we're still using the sample superstore data source. And I can tell you that dates are not stored in the date time data type in that data source. There are no times in the data source. But let's play make-believe for a moment. Typically, when you connect to the data source, it will bring in the appropriate data types for each of the fields. Sometimes, however, if your data in your data source, if your dates in your data source are formatted as date and time, it may not detect that. It normally does, but sometimes it doesn't. So if that's the case and you need to work with the time part of the date, you can change the data type yourself right here in the metadata grid on the data source view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at order date, and you notice the type has the little calendar there, and that's the date time data type. I'm going to select right there, that's the date data type on the calendar. I'm going to click on that calendar and I'm going to change it to date time. Now, if you expand your order date column in your grid, because there are no times in the original data source, it's going to set all the times to 12 a.m. So typically it will detect the date time data type, and you'll notice the symbol, it has the calendar with the clock on it. It will normally detect that. If you know for certain there are times in your data source and you need to use those times in your visualizations, you can change it like we just did here. Now we're going to just change that data type back to date. And now let's create a new worksheet. So when you're using a date field in a visualization, it applies an automatic date format to it. Let's see this in action. Let's drag the order date field to rows. And then we're going to do the drop down on it. And we are going to select day. And I selected the second day. So you'll notice that it puts in a 3-character month, and then it puts the day, a comma, and a 2-character year. That's the automatic format that it's using. Well, maybe we want our dates formatted differently. And so this is how you can do that. In your data pane on the left, you're going to right-click on order date, and you're going to choose default properties and then date format. So notice it defaults to automatic. You have a standard long date format in here, a standard short date format, and then a whole host of other different date formats. We want to use the date format that says 14, so we want the day before the month. So 14 March 2001 is the one we're going to use. So we're going to select that, but we don't want the comma after March. So with that date format selected, we're going to continue to scroll down to the bottom, and we're going to select custom. And so when you have a format in this list selected and then you go to custom, it gives you the format for that item you had selected. So all we have to do is remove the comma before the year and click OK. And notice our dates adjusted. Now, the thing about doing this on this sheet, we've changed the date format for that field regardless of what sheet you're going to use it on in a visualization. So keep that in mind as you're doing this. And so let's drag that day of order date to columns. And then we'll just go back and we'll add profit into rows. Anytime you're using dates in a visualization, you're doing time series analysis. So this is showing the profit over time. And let's go ahead and name that sheet Profit Over Time. Before we move on to our next lesson, I want to revisit continuous and discrete fields. And so let's create a new worksheet. And in the new worksheet, we're going to drag sales to rows and quantity to columns. So now we have two measures, one in rows, one in columns, okay? And it gives us a scatter plot visualization, which makes no sense and which we're going to fix here. So one thing I want to point out here is when you look in your fields list, the green fields, the green ones, are continuous and blue are discrete. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that. Let's go to the sum of quantity drop down, And we want to just make this a field. We don't want to make it a measure. So let's go ahead and choose dimension. So it's not doing the aggregate of sum on it. It's just showing all of the quantities on this line chart. And you can hover again on any point to see the quantity and the sale and the sum of sales on the tooltip. So let's go back to the quantity drop down. And you'll notice that not only is it now a dimension, but it's continuous. Let's change it to discrete. And now we have each individual quantity has its own broken individual separate part on the axis. And we're going to do the drop down on quantity. And it also changed it to a column chart when we did that. If we change it back to continuous, we'll get our line chart again. So I think this highlights it a little bit better than it did before. So we're going to actually just name this sheet Discrete VS for versus continuous, just so you have a reference for why we created that sheet. So our next lesson is where we're going to be relating parts of the data to the whole. And the question we're asking here is what percentage of total national sales is made in each region? So we're going to do a new sheet, another new sheet. And on this one, we're going to drag sales to the column shelf. And we're going to drag region from the orders table to rows. So we have the sum of sales by region here. What we want is the percentage of total national sales for each region. In order to do that, we're going to use our analysis menu. So I'm going to go up to analysis on the menu bar, and I'm going to hover over percentage of, and we're going to choose column, because our sales are in the column. So now it's showing, if you look at that horizontal axis, the percent of total sales for each region. And if you hover over any of the regions, you'll see on the tooltip what region it is and its percent of total sales. So that was easy breezy. And now we're going to name the sheet. And we have our answer. So percentage of total sales by region. And let's go ahead and save our file. Now you're going to learn how to do some analytics by visualizing distributions. And so let's go back to our sales by month and quarter sheet. And what we're going to do is we're going to add distribution bands to this visualization. Now you have total control of the values of the bands that you're going to see and how the bands are going to be placed on your visualization. So in order to do this, on your data pane to the left at the top of it, you have that analytics tab, and we're going to go there. Now they have the analytics options grouped. So you have summarizing analytics, you have model, and you have custom. It's under custom that you'll find distribution band. Now you'll notice that a few of the analytics are dimmed out, not available. So they won't be available if your data doesn't support that type of analytic. And so what we're going to do is we're going to click on click and drag distribution band onto your visualization, and you'll get the Add a Distribution Band pop-up. And we're going to just drop it on Table. So you get the Edit Reference Line Band or Box dialog that pops up, and I'm going to just move mine out of the way. And you'll see what it's done is it placed a 60% and 80% of average distribution band on our table. Now we're going to change that, but before we do so, we drag distribution band into the table placeholder. And so our scope here is entire table. Click on the option button in front of per pane, and you'll see, so the pane is each quarter is in a pane. And then if you do per cell, it's just each mark on this bar chart has the distribution on it. We're going to take it back to entire table. In the computation section where it says value, we're going to do the drop down. Now on the left side, we're going to leave it on percentages, but we're going to change the percentages that are there. So we are going to select the 60 and 80. Notice they're separated by commas, but no spaces. And we're going to type 15, comma, we'll do 25, comma, and we'll do 45. Or actually make it 35, 15, 25, and 35. And notice underneath that it's a percent of sum of sales, but it's showing the average in the distribution band. If we wanted to see the sum, we could change it to sum. We're going to leave it on average. And so just looking at it, our bands are too close together to really be able to see. So we're going to change it. We're going to change our numbers. So we're going to do 15, comma, 35, and 55. And we click out of that, and it adjusts a little bit more. I think I still want different numbers here. So it really depends on how it shows. I'm going to go from 15 to 50. Well, actually, I'm going to change all of the numbers. We're going to use 10 as the first number. So we'll do 10, 40, and 60. And click away from that. And I can see the distribution's a little bit better with that. Let's see what happens if I go and change it from average to sum. And now we're getting some better distributions. If I click away and just move this box out of the way, I can see that 40% of sum is here. So 10% of sum is here. 40 would start there, and 60 would start there. So I'm going to just change my values again. So you see how it differs whether you have it on sum or average or any of your other choices down there. So I'm going to leave 10, and then I'm going to do 20 and 30. Click away, and we can see how that looks. So all of my bands are showing the way they should be. You'll notice down here that I have 10%, 20%, and 30%. I'm going to go ahead and click OK on that box. Now, if I wanted to go back in and edit it, I can simply right-click on one of the percent of sum and choose Edit, and it takes me back into that dialog. Go ahead and click OK. So what would be the value of 10% of the sum? If I hover over the right border of that 10% band, well, the left border of that 10% band, a tooltip will pop up that tells me 10% of the sum equals, and in my case, it's 78,498. I can edit from here, I can format from here, or I can remove. If I hover over the next darker bolded horizontal line to the right, it's showing me 20% of the sum. And then if I hover over 30%, it's showing me 30%, and that's outside of the range of the data that we have here. That's why nothing is in that 30% band. And our last lesson in this module is visualizing multiple axes to compare different measures. So let's go ahead and create a new sheet. And so this is when you want to analyze two measures that have different scales. So what we're going to do is we're going to add order date to columns. And we're going to change it to the quarter of the order date. And I just did the first quarter on the list. And we're going to drag both sales and profit to rows. So Tableau automatically split the visualization with sales on the top and profit on the bottom. But look at the difference in the scales. Sales goes from really, let's see what this first point is, like 106,000, and it peaks at 359,000. Profit starts at 21,000 and it peaks at 46,000. So we have wildly different scales here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to right click on sum of profit in rows on the rows shelf. And almost at the bottom, we're going to click dual axis. So now it combines them and it gives the lines two different colors. And you'll notice that you have your sales axis on the left and your profit axis on the right. And that way it makes a little bit more sense. And it even created a little bit of a legend over here on the right with the measure names. Now for that legend, I can do the drop down and you can format the legend. It's showing the title. I'm going to uncheck title, just so it doesn't need to say measure names there. It's good enough with profit and sales. So that's a good example of when you would want to use dual axes in a visualization if your scales are widely different. And we're going to name this sheet Sales and Profit by Quarter. And go ahead and save your file. Module 3 started with learning about dimensions, measures, and discrete versus continuous fields, and how they impact the axes on visualizations. We created a crosstab viz to compare values across different dimensions and worked on changing the data type of a date field and changing the date format for the entire workbook. We answered the question, what percentage of total national sales is made in each region on a visualization? We moved on to adding distribution bands to a viz by using the Analysis tab in Worksheet View, and we learned how to view the actual value of the different distribution bands. We ended this module with creating a dual axis to show differing ranges of values. Module 4 is entitled Using Row Level and Aggregate Calculations. This module will narrow our focus to calculations in Tableau. By exploring these topics, you will learn practical examples of calculations and parameters. So we're going to start with a slide that breaks down the 3 levels of calculation in Tableau. Then we'll get hands-on by creating and editing calculations. The third lesson will focus on creating parameters. Then we'll move on to key performance indicators. In lesson 5, you'll learn how to do ad hoc calculations, also known as inline calculations. And then we'll end up going over some performance considerations for calculations in Tableau. Tableau has 3 levels of calculation that are listed on this slide. We're going to start with basic expressions. These allow you to transform values or members at the data source level of detail, which is known as a row level calculation, or at the visualization level of detail, which is known as an aggregate calculation. Then we have level of detail expressions, known as LOD. Just like basic expressions, LOD expressions allow you to compute values at the data source level and the visualization level. However, LOD expressions give you even more control on the level of granularity you want to compute. They can be performed at a more granular level, a less granular level, or an entirely independent level. And last but certainly not least, we have table calculations. Now, we're not going to be doing any table calculations in this module, but the next module is dedicated to table calculations. But just so you know in the background what they are, they allow you to transform values at the level of detail of the visualization only. I have a few definitions for you before we get hands-on. During this module, we'll be creating parameters, key performance indicators, and ad hoc calculations. A parameter is a workbook variable such as a number, date, or string that can replace a constant value in a calculation, filter, or reference line. These are placeholder variables that you can use in a formula so that the actual value is specified at runtime. They actually can allow you to provide more flexibility to your end users as well. Then we have key performance indicators, KPIs. That is a measurable value that shows how effectively a company is achieving key business objectives. And then ad hoc calculations are calculations that you can create and update as you work with a field on a shelf in the view. Ad hoc calculations are also known as type-in or inline calculations. We're going to create a row level calculation to get started, and we're going to do it on the ship mode field in the orders table. So let's create a new worksheet to get set up for this. And on the worksheet, you're going to drag order date and sales to the column shelf. And go ahead and drag ship mode to the rows shelf. So if you look at the ship modes, we have first class, same day, second class, and standard. And we're going to create a row level calculation that's just going to display the first word in the name of the ship mode. So we want it to display first, same, second, or standard. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to double click on ship mode in your rows shelf. So when you double click on it, you can see that it has brackets around the field, right? That's just how Tableau works. All the fields have brackets around them, square brackets. And we're going to click in front of the first square bracket, and we're going to type split, or start typing split. Now, it's a function. It's the split function, right? And when we split our customer name into first and last, in the background, it was using this function. So once I see the function on the list, I just highlight it and I tab it in, so that way I can avoid any typos or stuff like that. And then if you look right underneath the rows shelf, it gives you the syntax for the split function. So it requires a string, a delimiter, and a token number. Those are the parameters of that, or excuse me, the arguments of that function. So when we tabbed in split, it gave us the open and closing parenthesis. And we're going to get rid of the closing parenthesis right now. So we want the ship mode to have the open parenthesis in front of it. And then you can press your end key on your keyboard, end, to get to the end of that line. So you're outside of the closing square bracket for the ship mode field at this time. And you're going to type a comma. And now notice right underneath, it's looking for the delimiter argument. That's in bold now. First string was in bold. We told it the string argument is being met by ship mode field. And now we need to give it the delimiter argument. So we're going to type open double quote space close double quote, or another double quote. So that represents a space. So we're saying that in the ship mode field, the space is what separates the first word from the second word. And then we're going to do a comma because all of your arguments are separated by comma. And now it's looking for the token number of the token number argument. So what we want is we want the first block of text before the space to be what displays. So we're going to type a number 1 there. And then we're going to type the closing parenthesis. So it should say split, open paren, open square bracket, ship mode, closing square bracket, comma, double quote, space, double quote, comma, 1, closing parenthesis. Now, when you're outside of the parenthesis, notice the pop-up. It says to apply this, do Control and Enter. So press Control, Enter. And now you'll notice that it has split the ship mode. So it's only showing the first row. We have first, same, second, and standard, which is what we wanted. Let's go back up to our row level calculation and change the token number to 2. Do your end key to get outside of the parenthesis and Control Enter again. So now it's just showing the second word, right? And that's how that works. Change it back to a 1 and get outside your paren and do Control Enter again. So that is an example of a row level calculation. Let's go ahead and name this sheet. We'll name this sheet row level calculation for your future reference. And go ahead and save your file. Now we're going to create our aggregate basic calculation. And we're going to do this by making a duplicate of the sales and profit by quarter sheet. So I'm going to select that sheet, right click on it, and choose duplicate. So it gives it the same name, but it has the number 2 after it. And let's rename this sheet, the duplicated one, to aggregate calculation. The only field we want to keep is in the column shelf, so the quarter of the order date. So we're going to remove the sum of sales in rows and the sum of profit in rows. Now we're going to double click in the rows shelf, and we are going to type sales, and it shows up on the list, the sales measure. If you take it off of the list, it puts the square brackets around it. We're going to type a minus sign and then type profit. And you can grab that from the list as well. and you're going to do Control Enter. So that shows up on the visualization, right? Sales minus profit equals cost. And so that's what's showing on this visualization, the cost by order date at this point. Now, the cool thing about that is that we can save that as a field, right? So we're going to grab, I'm going to click away from it first. So you notice when you click away from it, it says sum of sales minus profit. And we're going to click on that. Oops, I'm just trying to do a single click. And we're going to drag it into the field list. So now it shows up as a measure and it just says sales minus profit. What we're going to do in the field list is we're going to rename it and we're going to call it cost. So it updates in the field list and it also updates in the calculation that we created. So what we're going to do is we're going to rename this sheet. Oh, we already named it aggregate calculation. That's fine. We don't have to rename it. So you can see that we used a calculation at the visualization level and we created a field out of it. And you can go ahead and save again. The first adjustment we're going to make on this line chart is we're going to make the quarter of the order date a continuous field instead of discrete. You can tell at the bottom that it's showing the quarters as individual separate items. The other indicator is that the color of the quarter order date field in the column shelf is blue, which represents discrete. So let's do that adjustment. I'm going to right click on it in the column shelf and I'm going to go down and just choose continuous. And now we have that continuous axis going across the bottom. And now I want to point out some information at the very, very, very bottom of your screen underneath your worksheet tabs. You have a little bit of a status bar on the left. And the status bar is currently saying that you have 4 marks on this line chart. It's 1 row by 1 column. And it gives you the total sum of the cost. Might be nice to view that on occasion. Now the 4 marks it's talking about, if I hover over the left end of the line, I'll see the first mark. And it also shows the legend, the tooltip when you're hovering. There's the second one, third, and fourth. Let's give this viz a bit more detail by adding another dimension and another measure to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click the profit measure and I am going to double click market segment. And both of them end up in rows. Market segment goes before the calculations. And so now we've given it more detail in the chart. Now what you're seeing here is, and you still have your quarters of order date at the bottom, but what you're seeing here is each market segment and then its cost and its profit. Even though we're going to focus on formatting visualizations in Module 6, we'll make this one more visually appealing and give end users the ability to interact with it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to the upper right and we're going to click on Show Me to expand that panel. And we're going to select a different type of line chart. It's called the dual lines chart. And I'm pointing to it on my screen right now. Dual lines. So let's select that type of chart and you can see the change immediately. You can do Control Z to undo. And so what it's doing, if you do Control Y to redo, it's showing it got rid of the profit on the left axis. So it has two lines. It's showing the cost on the axis over here. If you do Control Z again, you'll see that it has the profit and the cost separated, and the lines are in different panes. So what this does, I'm going to Control Y again, redo. What this does is it puts both of the lines in the same pane, and you can hover over the line to see which one is for cost and which one is for profit. Now go ahead and collapse Show Me. And we'd like to see a legend for this chart. We're going to go to the Analysis menu, hover over Legends, and the only one that's available to you is a color legend based on the measure names. So we're going to go ahead and select that. So you see on the right side, you have your legend. Now, we want to change the colors of our lines. So we can go to the drop down on the upper right of the legend, and we're going to choose Edit Colors. And the first thing we're going to do is select a color palette. The color palette I'm looking for is Lightning Watermelon. It has both a red and a green color in there, which is what I'm looking for. So on the left side, we're going to click on Cost, and we're going to give Cost the deepest red color. And then click on Profit, and mine is already green, but I'm going to just click on the green under this color palette. And we can apply at the bottom, and you'll see it updates both on your dual line visualization as well as on the legend. And you can go ahead and close that dialog box. So we'd like to have more granularity in our visualization. So we're going to go up and right click on Quarter Order Date in Columns. And we're going to change it to the second month. And the reason why I'm using that one is the second one on the list shows the month and the year. So now we're getting more level of detail information here because it's going by months instead of quarters. And the other thing that we're going to do here, and this is to give your end users some interactivity with the viz, and that's we're going to apply a filter. We're actually going to show a filter card. So right click on Month Order Date and choose Show Filter. And so the filter card shows over on the right above the legend. And end users can use the slider to change and look at different details. And the easiest way to clear a filter from the filter card, if you look in its upper right-hand corner, there's a funnel with an X. We're going to click that, and it clears the filter. Go ahead and save your workbook. To add more visual appeal, we're going to change the background color of the sheet itself. So I'm just going to right-click in a blank area of the viz and choose Format to open that pane on the left side of the screen. Right underneath where it says Format Font, we're going to select the third icon, the paint bucket, which is for shading. And notice the worksheet default is white. We're going to do the drop down there and go to More Colors. And in the Select Color dialog, select the lightest color green that you see. And then on the right side, in the palette, I'm going to drag that marker that's there. I'm going to click and hold and start dragging it down. I want the color to be somewhat light and kind of washed out looking. And I'm going to click OK at the bottom. So now this viz is more appealing than the one that we had with the white background. Changing the sheet color also caused, if you look on the right, it caused the measure names, legend, its body of it, to have that same color. So just so everything kind of matches, we're going to change the color of the month order date filter to the same color. I'm going to do that by going to the drop down arrow at the top right corner of it and choosing Format, Filter, and Set Controls. And then on the left side, where it says Shading, that the last color you picked should be on the first one on the list right above More Colors. So I'm going to select that color, and now at least they both match on the right side. Go ahead and save your file again, and then we're going to start creating parameters. Now we're going to create parameters. Remember, parameters are variable placeholders. The beauty of using parameters is that you can show parameter controls on a viz, and users can select the measures to be used on both axes in the visualization. So typically when you create a parameter, it's then referenced in a calculated field. In this lesson, we're going to create 2 parameters and 2 calculated fields. So to get started, we're going to go over and close the Format, Filter, and Set Controls pane. Oops. So we get back to our data pane. At the top of the data pane to the right of your search box, you have your funnel for filtering. You have your View Data Grid, and to the right of that, you have a drop-down arrow. We're going to use that arrow and select Create Parameter. We're going to name this parameter Choice 1 Selector. And that's how we're going to reference it in a calculated field. Under Properties for the data type, we're going to change it from float to string. And then at the bottom where it says Allowable Values, we're going to select the Option button for List. So you get a value display as table underneath, and you're going to click where it says Click to Add. And our first value here is going to be discount. And when you press your Tab key, you'll see the display as is the same. And it gives you another Click to Add box. The second one is going to be profit. Then we have quantity. And lastly, we're going to put in sales. So we've named our parameter. We gave it the data type that we desire, and we populated the allowable values for that parameter, 4 of them. And we're ready to click OK at the bottom. So you'll notice at the bottom of your data pane in the parameters section, you'll see your Choice 1 selector. And we are going to duplicate it so we create our second parameter. So I'm going to right click on that, and I'm going to choose Duplicate. So now we have Choice 1 selector copy. I'm going to right click on that and edit. So we're going to get rid of the word copy in parentheses at the end of the name and change the name of this one. So notice, as soon as we got rid of copy, it lets us know that we already have a parameter named Choice 1 Selector, and it turns red. You can't have 2 with the same name. We're going to change that 1 to the number 2. And in this one, we don't have to change anything else. We're using the same values. So we're going to click OK. And now we're going to create the first of our 2 calculated fields. We can go to the drop-down arrow at the top of the data pane again, and this time select Create Calculated Field. And this one, oops, did not mean to do that. Let me move this box over. So we're going to give the calculated field a name, and this is going to be placeholder and the number 1. And then we're going to click in the text box there, and we're going to type in this calculation. I'm going to get it typed in on my screen, and then you guys will be able to pause and get it typed in on your screen. So go ahead and type in what I typed in, the case statement that I typed in. You can pause the video to keep it on your screen. When you're done, then we'll discuss the statement. A case statement is very similar to the if, then, else, if, else construct. So what this is saying is, when discount is selected in the choice one selector parameter, then display the discount field. If profit is selected in that selector, that parameter, then display the profit field, so on and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and notice before we go ahead, in the bottom, it will let you know very clearly whether a calculation is valid or not. We're going to go ahead and click OK. So now if you look in the orders table, you'll see placeholder 1, and we are going to right click on it, and we're going to duplicate that calculated field. We're going to right click on its copy and edit. And we're going to change the name. Going to get rid of copy and just name this one placeholder 2. The other thing we have to change in here is that case statement, the first line. We're going to change it to choice 2 selector. And then we can click OK. So now we're going to pull it all together. Let's go ahead and create a new sheet. And on the new sheet, we're going to drag placeholder 2 to columns, and we're going to drag placeholder 1 to rows. Let's drag customer last to the marks card on the detail section and drop it there. And then we're going to drag region to the color card on marks. Oops, I dragged profit there. Yeah, this is where you ignore your trainer. Let me grab region and drag that to color. In the data pane, we're going to right click on each of our parameters. So I'm going to right click on choice 1 selector, and I'm going to choose show parameter. And I'm going to do the same with choice 2. And so over on the right side, the end user can choose what they're looking at in this bubble chart. So right now, both of these are on discount, right? So if I hover over any of the marks, you'll see that both placeholder 1 and placeholder 2 are both showing the same value because it's the discount. So choice 1 selector, I'm going to leave on discount, and I'm going to go to choice 2 selector and choose profit. So now my bubble chart updates, and when I hover over a mark, I'll see placeholder 1, the value of the discount, and placeholder 2, the value of the profit. And so end users can choose any combinations between the 4. I'm going to look at quantity in 1 and sales in 2 now, to be able to interact with the data and view what they need to see. So we created 2 parameters by duplicating the first one, and then we referenced them in calculated fields by duplicating the first calculated field. So let's change our placeholders so they're not aggregated. And we can do that by going to the Analysis menu and unchecking or clicking on Aggregate Measures to uncheck it. Now, you'll notice as you're making changes in your Choice 1 and Choice 2 selectors that the axes titles are not updating. In order to make them update, unfortunately, they won't update dynamically in Tableau, but you can create a calculated field to make it update, and that's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to go to the drop down at the top of the data pane and select Create Calculated Field again, and I'm going to name this one X-axis, my casing's off, and then title. Now I'll go ahead and get the case statement in here, and then you can pause this video and get it into your own. This case statement is saying when they select the text field, right, discount, then the axis title will display discount, so on and so forth. There's an else null statement in there. So I just threw that in there. It's not going to make a difference with these selectors. In other words, even when they're just sitting there default, they have something selected. So there'll never be a situation when it is empty, when one of the selectors is empty or both of them. But if they were, it would display null as the axis title. So go ahead and click OK and copy this or duplicate this calculated field and change the name to Y-axis title and change the case to Choice 1 selector. And when you're done, that calculated field should look like the one on my screen. Go ahead and click OK. So if we look in our data pane, we'll see both of those. And the way that we use them is we're going to drag them. But before we do that, we want to get rid of placeholder 1 and placeholder 2 titles. So to do that, we're going to double click on placeholder 1. And we're just going to go down to the title, selected, and delete. And close that box. And do the same for placeholder 2. So now all we have to do is we're going to drag the X-axis title calculated field to rows. And we're going to drag Y-axis title to columns. And notice, based on whatever you have in your choice selectors, that's what's showing in the axis. So one thing we're going to do is right-click on Sales in your X-axis and choose Rotate Label. And then right-click on X-axis Title and choose Hide Field Labels for Columns. Oops. I meant to say Hide Field Labels for Rows there, but in either case, you're going to hide field labels for both rows and columns. Right? And that gets rid of the Y-axis title and X-axis title that was showing over there. So now go ahead and make some more choices in your selectors, and the appropriate axis should be updating. And then we're going to rename our titles on our selectors. So I'm going to go to the Choice 1 selector drop-down arrow and choose Edit Title. And I'm going to call it First Choice. And click OK. And edit the second one, Choice 2 selector, to say Second Choice. And OK. So yeah, pretty cool. So we had to create the two calculated fields to make those axes labels update automatically based on the choices that we have. Go ahead and save your file. Now let's rename the sheet to Parameters and Calculated Fields. And again, that's for your future reference. And if we want, when we do the sheet, it gives the title. If you want to right click, you can actually hide the title if you don't want it on the sheet. And go ahead and create a new sheet. Let's start by renaming the title from sheet, whatever number it is, sheet 11 in my case. We're going to name the title Key Performance Indicators. And click OK. And then let's name the sheet tab KPIs, which they're normally referred to as KPIs. So just a reminder, the key performance indicator is a measurable value that shows how effectively a company or other entity is achieving key business objectives. So the first step in creating a KPI is to create a view that includes the field that you want to assess. In our case, the field is sales, all right? So what we're going to do is we're going to double click subcategory underneath product in the orders table, and it goes to rows. And we're going to double click region, and that goes into columns. So it just created this little table situation for us. Now, we're going to grab the sales field and we're going to drag it to the text on the marks card. Drop it on text. So that's the first step where we're having the field that we want to assess in the view, as well as some other dimensions. But we have the field in the view, the sales field. The second step is creating the KPI's threshold, and that demarcates success from failure in the KPI, and we do that via a calculated field. So another way to get to a calculated field here is to go up to the Analysis menu, and you can choose Create Calculated Field from there. As usual, I will get the function in, and then you can pause and get it in on your screen. And then we'll discuss it after you get it in. So we're using the if-then-else construct. So if the sum of sales is greater than 25,000, then we want the text above benchmark. If it's not, we want the text to be below benchmark. Now, I split this up over 3 different lines. I like to have my if and my end statements in the same margin, if you will. And I don't want to ever be in a situation where I have to scroll across or try to arrow across to see a whole calculation. So I typically split them up like that. Now, while we're in here, I will show you this. If I'm anywhere within that calculation, you see this little right arrow on the right side? If I click on that, it gives me examples, well, the syntax of the expression, and it lets you know what that function does, and then it gives you an example. So for any of the functions that are in here, you can get that information when you're doing a calculated field. And I'm going to just do the left arrow to collapse that, and I'm going to click OK. The third and final step in this process is to update the view to use KPI-specific shape marks. To do that, in the marks card where it says automatic, we're going to do the drop down and select shape. And then we're going to drag our KPI from the data pane and drop it on top of shape in the marks card. And so it may have put some default shapes on your table here, and we're going to fix that. Now, normally it will open the edit shape box as soon as you do that, but if it didn't, I can just click on shape in the marks card to get the edit shape box open. Now, over on the right where it says select shape palette, we're going to do the drop down and select KPI. You're going to click on the left, click on above benchmark, and we're going to do the green check mark. For below benchmark, we're going to use the red X. And we're going to apply at the bottom and click OK. If it did not display a legend for you on the right, you're going to go to the Analysis tab, the Analysis menu, hover over Legends, and you'll notice this time Shape Legend KPI is the only one available. Go ahead and select that so you get your legend. And now what we're going to do is we just want our KPI marks in this table. So in your marks pane, you're going to drag sum of sales into detail. Drop it on top of detail in the marks pane. And now we're just seeing our KPI marks. And at the top of the table, right click on region people 1 and hide field labels for columns. We don't need that there. Go ahead and save your workbook. Our last hands-on lesson in this module is ad hoc calculations. So we're going to go ahead and create a new worksheet here. And go ahead and drag market or double click on market segment. We want it in rows. Now what we're going to do, so remember an ad hoc calculation is also known as an inline calculation. It's like when you just want to do a calculation. And what we're going to do is we're going to double click in the blank space in the column shelf. And notice it gives us that long box to work in, right? So it says drag dimensions or measures here, which we've been doing. We've been dragging or double clicking dimensions and measures to get them in columns and rows. And it also says or double click to start a new calculation. And that's what we did. We're double clicking there and we're going to do an ad hoc calculation. So I'd like you to type AVG, and when average pops up, go ahead and press your tab key when it's selected. And then we're going to type start typing profit and grab it off the list and tab it in. And now we're going to do a divisional slash, type AVG again, tab it in. This time type sales and tab that in. So we're saying average profit divided by average sales. And that gives us the average profit ratio. That's what that calculation will do. So it's letting you know at the end of it to do Control Enter to apply it. So there's your average profit divided by average sales. In other words, the average profit ratio. Now we're going to right-click anywhere within our visualization and go to Format. And the Format pane opens on the left. And where it says Fields to the right of, the font and the paint bucket, we're going to do the drop down next to Field. And we're going to choose our ad hoc calculation. And we want to format its numbers to percentages. So right under scale, I'm going to go to numbers and choose percentage. And we can make it 0 decimal places and click out of there. And we can close that format pane. And we're going to name this sheet AVG for average, profit ratio per segment, and press enter. And save your workbook. So the last lesson in this module is performance considerations with different types of calculations. So your basic expressions, your row level, and your aggregate calculations, they're generated as part of the query to the underlying data source and are calculated in the database, and they scale very well. So basic expressions are thumbs up, they're cool. Then you have your level of detail expressions. There's 2 different panels here with performance considerations for those. So they're also generated as part of the query to the underlying data source, and they're also calculated in the database. They are expressed as a nested select. So if you know kind of SQL select statements, it's a select statement within a select statement. And so they are dependent on database performance. A table calculation or blending might perform better than an LOD expression or vice versa. It just depends on the data. And you would want to assume referential integrity for joins if your queries run slowly when you use these expressions. Now, we also have some more performance considerations here. So when you're dealing with Booleans and integers, when you create calculated fields, the data type you use has a significant impact on the calculation speed. Integers and Booleans are generally much faster than strings. So, of course, we use strings, right, in our calculated field. If your calculation produces a binary result, for example, yes, no, pass, fail, over, under, be sure to return a Boolean result rather than a string. When it comes to parameters, a common technique is to show a parameter control, and you guys have seen that, so users can select a value that determines how a calculation is performed. Typically, to give the user easy to understand options, it makes sense to create the parameter as a string type. I believe we did that. But numerical calculations are much faster than string calculations, so take advantage of the display as feature of parameters, that is, show text labels but use underlying integer values for the calculation logic. Now, these come into play when you're dealing with huge data sets. We haven't had any performance issues up to now in what we've been doing in our calculations. So remember, this slide deck is also in the files for the video description for your future reference. And then other considerations would be to convert date fields as necessary, use else if logic statements. We used an else statement, not an if and not an else if, and to aggregate measures. So we got a lot accomplished in Module 4 by using row level and aggregate calculations. We began this module by learning about the 3 levels of calculations in Tableau and reviewed some module definitions. We got hands-on by creating row level calculations and aggregate calculations, which both fall into the basic expressions level of calculations. Row level calculations are created at the data source level of detail, and aggregate calcs are at the visualization level of detail. We moved on to creating parameters and calculated fields that reference them, and learned how to make the axes labels update based on parameter selections. We went through the 3 steps necessary to create key performance indicators and then created an ad hoc calculation. We ended by reviewing some performance considerations to keep in mind as you continue to work in Tableau. In Module 4, you were introduced to the 3 levels of calculations in Tableau. In this module, we're going to focus on table calculations, which are the 3rd level of calculations in Tableau. So our first lesson will be an overview of table calculations. When we get hands-on, we'll be using what are known as quick table calculations. You'll learn about scope and direction and how they relate to addressing and partitioning. And then we'll move on to creating advanced table calculations. And throughout, we'll be using some practical examples. So just a quick description here. Table calculations allow you to transform values at the level of detail of the visualization only. That's what they are. When we're ready to get hands-on again in Tableau, we'll start with quick table calculations. These allow you to quickly apply a common table calculation to your visualization using the most typical settings for that calculation type. On this slide, I have a list of the quick table calculations that are available in Tableau. So everything from running totals, difference, percent of total, percent difference, rank, moving average, all of these are quick table calculations. So let's switch back over to Tableau and get started. We're going to continue to use our Sample Superstore Live workbook. And let's go ahead and create a new worksheet. So on this worksheet, we're going to drag order date to columns. And we're going to drag state province to rows. And it gives us our table, also known as crosstab format. Now we're going to drag our sales measure to the text box on the marks card. And we're going to drag our profit measure to the color box on the marks card. So now we're seeing the sum of profit in color and the sales are not colored in this table. Now the next thing we're going to do just to make it stand out a little bit more, we're going to go to the mark type drop down, so where it says automatic on your marks card, and we're going to choose square. So we'll place squares around those values, making them a little bit more visible. Notice because we dragged profit to color, it gives us a color legend on the right. Now we're ready to add our quick table calculation. So in the marks card, we're going to right click on sum profit, and we're going to go down and hover over quick table calculation and click on difference. So let's hover over the Colorado 2019 value, and you'll see the tooltip. It gives you the state and province, the year of the order date, and then it says difference in profit from the previous along table across. So you'll learn the detail about that in a moment, but what it's doing is it's going across the table. And then it'll go down to the next row and go across that row of the table. So when I hover on that first number, the difference in profit from the previous along table is empty because there's nothing previous to this. If we had 2018 there, then it would show a difference in profit. If we look at the next one, the Colorado for 2020, that one has a $249 difference in profit from Colorado in 2019. And it shows the sales value as well, which is showing in the cell. So you can continue to look at it like that. Let's go ahead and name this sheet Sales by State with Profit Difference, and press enter. Now, if you look at that quick table calculation, let me point this out before we go there. You'll notice in the marks card that the sum of profit has the delta symbol on it, which conveys that it has a table calculation applied to that measure. If we want to see the calculation window, we can right click on sum profit in the marks card, and we could go to edit table calculation. So it's showing the calculation type. We said difference, right? And it's showing the direction that it's going. And we can close that table calculation box. So when you use a quick table calculation, you can go in and edit it. And a lot of times people will start with a quick table calculation and then decide if they need to edit it and change its direction or other information. Let's go ahead and save this file. So when you add a table calculation, you must use all dimensions in the level of detail, either for partitioning or for addressing. So before we go in and start creating table calculations, you need to have this background information. Partitioning is known as scoping. The dimensions that define how to group the calculation, the scope of data it is performed on, are called partitioning fields. The calculation is performed separately on each partition. And then you have addressing, which is also known as direction. The remaining dimensions upon which the table calculation is performed are called addressing fields and determine the direction of the calculation. So we saw when we went and edited our quick table calculation, and even when we looked at the tooltip, that it was using table across as the direction. So, and the partitioning of it was the table itself, the scoping. Now, just to give you examples of these. So table across computes across the length of the table and restarts after every partition. And there's an example of that on the screen. So it will go across and perform the calculation on all of January's numbers going across, and then it will come down to February and do those numbers for the entire table. The next one is table down. So in this example, it computes down the length of the table and restarts after every partition. So this one, it will use the computation for all of 2011 from top to bottom, and then it will start over again with 2012. Oops. Then we have table across, then down. It computes across the length of the table and then down the length of the table. So in this example, it will go all the way across January for quarter one, and then it will go down and go across February, and it will keep going down and across, or across and then down the length of the table. The next one is table down then across. In this case, it goes down to 2011, and then it will go across to 2012 and down, so on and so forth, as you can see on this graphic. And then we have pane down, computes down an entire pane. So you see it's in the quarter one pane. It will go down that pane. And then you have a pane across then down. It will go across the entire pane and then down the pane before moving to the next pane, I should say. And this one is pane down then across. It computes down and then across the pane. We have cell. It computes within a single cell. And then we have specific dimensions. So that computes only within the dimensions you specify. If all the dimensions are selected, then the entire table is in scope. So if you look at this screenshot here, this graphic, you'll see that underneath, so with your compute using, it has all of those that we just covered, table across through cell. When you have specific dimensions selected, you can select the dimensions that you want it to calculate across or down. And so in this example, month of order date, is calculated, and then quarter of order date would be calculated in that order. And we'll talk about at the level on the next slide. So at the level is only available when specific dimension is selected. Deepest means the calculation should be performed at the deepest level of granularity. The other choices underneath that would be quarter of order date, and then the calculation should be performed at the quarter level, or month of order date, where the calculation should be performed at the month level. So I don't have a screen grab of with the drop down next to deepest, but that's what it would show in this example. So now we're ready to start doing our table calculations. I already created a new sheet, and I dragged order date to the rows shelf. Now, in the rows shelf, I'm going to click the plus sign in front of year order date, and it gives me the quarter. And on the quarter one, I'm going to click the plus sign so I get the month. So right now you should have year, quarter, and month of order date on the rows shelf. Now we decide that we want the quarter and the month to be in rows, but we want the year to be in columns. So I'm going to just drag and drop year of order date up to the column shelf. And then we're going to drag the sales measure to text on the marks card like we did for our quick table calculation, but we also use profit there. And we're not doing that here. So we're seeing the sales broken down by year, quarter, and month. And now we're ready for our table calculation. So I'm going to just right-click sum of sales in the marks card and go to Add Table Calculation. So it defaults to the calculation type difference from. It defaults compute using table across. And what we are going to select for right now, we're going to select pane across then down for our compute using, and we're going to leave it on difference from for right now. If you do the drop down there, you'll see those are the same ones that you have for quick table calculations as well. They're the same. Quick table calculation just uses default settings. You can then go and edit them, but a table calculation, you can set it up the way you want it while you're creating it. And then we can just close that box because it's already done it. So hover over the 2020 January figure, and it says the difference in sales from the previous is 9,307. There's nothing there showing currently for the previous. But the truth of the matter is, the previous one is blocked out. If you hover over it, it doesn't show you what the sales are. But I actually took note of what these sales were. So for January 2019, the sales were 77. So for January of 2020, the sales were actually 93.84. So it's showing the difference in sales, which is 93.07. So we're in the pane. The pane in this case is quarter one, and we selected across and then down. So as you keep going across, you'll see the previous differences, which are showing in the cells. And then it goes down, and then it goes across, and then it goes down, and then it goes across. So that is what that is showing you. So if you want to make a note, I'll give you the actual sales numbers for January and February for the quarter one pane. And the actual sales numbers starting with January 2019 and going across would be 77, 93, 84, 35, 67, and 1858. And then for February 2019, it's 23, going across, 44, 17, 90, and 21,042. Now, before we do our next table calculation, let's rename this sheet. And this one we will call difference from previous sales. And we'll leave that as the title as well. Now, the one thing we want to do in here is we want to format the numbers, and we want to give them a custom number format so that positive numbers, well, let me put it like this, so that negative numbers will show in parentheses. And so we're going to right click on sum of sales in the marks card, and notice it has that delta symbol. So whether it's a quick table calculation or a regular table calculation, the measure will have the delta symbol. And we're going to right click on that, and we're going to go to format. And on the format pane that opens on the left, under default, we're going to do the drop down for numbers, and we're going to choose custom. And in the format text box on the right side, you're going to type a $, a £, comma, 3 more £, and then a semicolon. So that's how the positive numbers are going to display, right? We're not having any decimals. It's going to have a comma after the first number or first 2 numbers, however many there are, and then 3 more numbers afterwards. The semicolon separates the format. So now we're going to give it the negative number format. We're going to type a parenthesis, open parenthesis, and we'll do a $. Now you could put the minus sign there for negative, but I think because it's in parentheses, that's kind of redundant. And we're going to repeat the same format. So the £, comma, pound, and then close the parentheses. And you can see that it's already done it. So our positive numbers are not in parentheses. Our negative numbers are. And I'll show you if I put the $ after, if I put the minus sign after the negative $, you can see how that looks. And if you want it to look like that, you can keep it like that. I prefer it not there. So I'm going to get rid of it. And I'm going to just click away from the format, and I'm going to close the format pane. And now I'm going to save the file again. We're going to create another table calculation. But before we do that, I just want to talk to you about it for a moment. I'm going to show you a little trick that I use. When we did this one, I had the original sales numbers, and I gave you them for January and February in this data set so that you can compare and see that the differences that are being represented in the table are correct. Now I'm going to show you how you'll have a reference so you can, when you use a table calculation, you can refer to the original numbers. You know, in Tableau, you can't have multiple visualizations on the same sheet. You can with a dashboard, but while you're building the sheet, sometimes that information might be useful for you. So let's go ahead and create a new sheet. We want the year and the quarter of the order date in columns, and the region and category to rows. Go ahead and set that up. And drag the sales measure to text on the marks card to populate the table. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just name this sheet Actual Sales. Having problems getting my taskbar to move. There we go. Actual Sales. Okay, now we're going to duplicate that sheet. And so we have everything on it, on the duplicate, except the table calculation that we want to use, which is a running total. Right-click on your sum of sales in the mark card and click on Add Table Calculation. For the calculation type, we're going to do the drop down, and it's going to be running total. And it defaults to table across. And let's leave it on that default for right now. We're going to do the X to close that dialog box. So it's doing a running total for the entire table by going across each row and then navigating down to the next row, so on and so forth. But what you're seeing there is in your tooltip, you're seeing the running sum of sales, right? And so if you go back to your actual sales sheet, you'll see that Q3 for the central region for furniture for 2019 is the first quarter that's populated, and that's 106. Then Q4 is 1354. When I go back to the next sheet, I can see the 106, and then I see the running total, which is 106 plus 1354. So that's a way that you can actually have the raw data, so to speak, so that you can just check and make sure that the calculations are correct, and they almost always are. And now on our sheet with the running total on it, we're going to right-click on sum of sales in the marks card, and we're going to edit the table calculation. And this time, we're going to select specific dimensions. And the year of order date and the quarter of order date are already selected. So we're telling it which dimensions to calculate on in that order. Underneath that, where it says restarting every and it defaults to none, we're going to do the drop down and select year of order date. So we're telling it to calculate the running total for the year and quarter of order date and restart for every year. And it's already updated it in the background. I mean, I can move that out of the way, right? So we said specific dimensions, and it's doing it for every year and quarter of order date, and then it will move to the next year and quarter of order date, as opposed to just doing table across, which is what we had before. For this one, we're going to edit the title. And we're going to get rid of that sheet name placeholder in there. And we'll call it Running Totals by Year per Region and Category. And then we'll just name the sheet tab Running Totals. And if you want to put quick calculation for future reference, you can. Go ahead and format the numbers as currency with no decimal places. And your table should look like mine. Go ahead and save your workbook, and we'll do another quick table calculation. So go ahead and create a new worksheet. For this one, let's build a table with category in columns, month of order date in rows, and sales as text. And your worksheet should look like mine at this point. And now we're going to add a table calculation, and we're going to do a running total again. So I'm going to right click on sum of sales in the marks card, add table calculation, select the type, and then I'm going to use table down under compute using. And I'm going to close that dialog box. So you can see it's doing a running total. It's going down one column. Then it starts at the top of the next column. So this is really like a running total for each category. If you hover over any figure, it says running sum of sales along table down. All right. Okay, we're going to change that. Go ahead and right-click on your sum of sales in the marks card. We're going to hover over Compute Using, and we want to choose Table Down, then Across. And so now you see it's changed it. It's going down the first column, then across to the top of the second column. It's like doing a running total, not per category, but for the entire table in this way. And that way you ultimately see the total amount of sales. That's going to be in that last cell underneath technology. That's the total sales amount. Let's go ahead and format our numbers so that they're currency with 0 decimal places. And we can name this sheet. We'll name the sheet Another Table Calculation. And I actually had us misname the previous sheet. If you added on that quick table calculation for the previous sheet, it's just a table calculation if you want to edit that one. Let me finish spelling another correctly here. And I'm just renaming the previous one so it doesn't say quick calculation, it says table calculation. There. And we can save the file. We should probably edit the title on this one. And we're actually going to change the name of the sheet as well. So this one, we're going to edit the title first. Instead of Another Table Calculation, we're going to call it Running Totals dash Entire Table. And then for the Sheet tab, we're going to edit that to say we can get rid of Another and have Table Calculation. And at the end of that, we'll do Running Totals Entire Table. All right, let's do a new sheet because we're going to do another quick, not quick, I keep saying quick. We're going to do another table calculation, and it will allow you to add a secondary calculation. So for this one, we're going to drag state to columns, state province to columns, if I can drag here. And we're going to do market segment for rows. And then for our state, we're going to right click on state in the columns shelf and choose filter. And we are going to, at the bottom of that select from list, we're going to choose none. So it deselects everything. And we're going to select Arizona, California, and Idaho. We'll grab that one. And then we're going to scroll down and we want New Mexico, then Oregon and Washington. And then click OK. And we are going to drag sales to text. Oh, it's already there. Drag sales to text in the marks card. All right. So for this one, we're going to right click on our sum of sales in the marks card, add table calculation. We're going to select running total again. And we're going to choose table down, then across. And then notice at the bottom, it has add secondary calculation. Now, this is the thing, that checkbox may not always be there. For example, if you go to running total and do the drop down, and you select rank, then you don't get to add a secondary calculation. So the only calculation types that allow you to add a secondary calculation are running total and moving calculation. So we're on running total. We're going to check we have our table across then down already selected. We're going to recheck add secondary calculation, and it opens up a wider screen. So you have your primary calculation type as the running total. For our secondary calculation type, we're going to select percent difference from, and we're going to do table across then down again. And then we can close that box. So if you hover over any tooltip, it says percent difference in running sum of sales from the previous along table across then down. So it's combining them. It's the percent difference in that running total sum of sales from the previous one. Now, the other thing we would want to do with this to give the end user some more flexibility is go ahead and right click on state province again in your columns and choose show filter. So if they wanted to see different state groupings, or not groupings, but different states here, they can just check them in the state province filter on the right hand side. So this again is showing the percent difference in running totals. And we're going to edit the title. Get rid of that sheet name placeholder, and we'll just name it percent difference in sales running totals. And for the sheet, we're going to name this one table calculation dash secondary calculation, and save your file. By way of recap, we began Module 5, Table Calculations, the same way we began our previous modules, with an overview of what would be covered in the module and a definition of a quick table calculation and those available in Tableau. We created a quick table calculation which showed the difference in profit from previous profit values in a table, and the table included sales values and used a square shape to make values stand out. We then moved on to an overview of table calculations, where you learned about partitioning, also known as scope, and addressing, also known as direction, fields. We created a table calculation that showed the difference in previous sales based on year, quarter, and month of the order date. We then created a custom number format to show negative values in parentheses. We created a table showing actual sales values so we could compare them to our next table calculation, which showed running totals by year per region and category. We did another table calculation showing the cumulative running totals for the table, and ended by creating a table calculation with a secondary calculation added to it. You learned that only the running total and moving calculation types allow secondary calculations. Thank you for viewing this Tableau introductory course. We're going to review, by way of conclusion, what we've covered in this extensive course. We moved from foundational to advanced visualizations in Module 3, where we compared values across different dimensions, added dates to our visualizations, and learned how to relate parts of the data to the whole. That's when we got our first exposure to visualizing distributions, and also visualizing multiple axes to compare different measures. In Module 4, we moved into using row level and aggregate calculations, First, we reviewed the 3 levels of calculation in Tableau, and then we created and edited calculations. You were able to create parameters in this module, and we created a key performance indicator visualization. We created ad hoc calculations right in the columns or rows shelf, and we reviewed some performance considerations to keep in mind. In Module 5, we focused on table calculations, which are the 3rd level of calculations in Tableau. We began with an overview, and then we used some quick table calculations, which of course can be edited. You learned about scope and direction and how they relate to addressing and partitioning. And then we went into advanced table calculations, and throughout this module, we used practical examples.